before I start turning red and getting all embarrassed. Well, thank you everybody. I'm Harley Smith. I'm the research director for Grow University right now. So we do have online classes too. I'll tell you about right up front. If you want to learn more in the comfort of your own home, then go to growuniversity.net. And there's a schedule of classes. Sign up for them. They're free. And once you register for a class, you can get the recording of it if you want for free. So if you miss the time, the scheduled time, then you can watch it at your leisure. And we'll have some support materials as well. That's sponsored by MPK Industry, so as a service to our industry. So when I do the classes, there's people from Hawaii, there's people from Australia, from all over the world, a lot of California folks. But I like to fill it up with Michigan gardeners because we're some of the best gardeners in the world, right? Right here in Michigan, I believe it. I believe it. Especially after today's class, we'll learn how to maximize yield. This is a new class for me. I just prepared this PowerPoint because personally I try to go for optimum quality. That's mine. I want to grow the best of the best. I don't really care if I sacrifice 10% yield to get better colors, better aromas, better flavors. You know, if I can increase the nutritional value of food or the medicinal value of medicine, that's my first goal. And then secondarily is the yield. But when I work with commercial growers, they're going for maximum yield. So I know that there's a compromise, small compromises, but hopefully today I'm going to give you some things that you'll be able to increase quality and yield. Because we'll be following some of the tricks from the pros, especially from the Netherlands and overseas, because they're way ahead of us. They're 20 years ahead of us. We cannot even get close to the production that they're doing. You know, the best hydroponic greenhouses I've seen here in the United States, say for tomatoes, were 52 kilos per square meter. That's a lot. That's huge. They're over 70 kilos now in the Netherlands. They're reducing the energy budgets, increasing yield, and reducing or eliminating pesticides and fungicides. So we have some catching up to do. So, but we'll start today. Okay, this is maximizing yield. I said I added with biohydroponics to it, and that's for hydroponics or soil. But biohydroponics is combining the minerals with the organic biostimulants. So if you have all the essential elements in just the right proportions, you can spoon feed your crop. You can make it a little more vegetative. You can make it a little more generative. You can increase the root production just in those first few weeks. You can do some things to unstall your plants later on. So the minerals are very important. All the essential elements in the right amount for each stage of the plant's growth. Also, I like to do a little what they call spoon feeding, where you just make fine adjustments to your feeding schedule. In the Netherlands, they have every mineral as its own tank in the commercial growers, and the computer will change the recipes even according to how much sunlight the plants are getting. That's how advanced they are. But I've learned from them, and actually last time I was there, they were pumping me for information because apparently now I know more about the biostimulants and some of the amino acid products even more than the Dutch do. So we are catching up in some ways, but we have a ways to go. So we'll be doing that. The biostimulants aid with the uptake of minerals. They improve the plant's natural resistance to pests and disease and increase yields at the same time. So let's get going on this. Start with the environment. We're going to talk about the environment at the beginning, and then we'll be talking about the root zone second, because we want to balance both. You have to have if you don't have the right environment, you can have the best fertilizer in the world. You can have the most expensive biostimulant product in the store. It won't perform, because light is the limiting factor. So you want the right intensity of light, you want the right quality of light, the colors of the spectrum. In the Netherlands now they're experimenting with light recipes, where they're actually adding specific spectrums to the crop at specific times and getting another increase in yield again. So they'll be getting another 10-20% increase just by manipulating the light. Plants need full spectrum light. They need the red end of the spectrum and they need the blue end of the spectrum. During the vegetative growth, plants prefer the blue end of the spectrum, especially right here at this 460 nanometer wavelength. These other peaks, that's for photosynthesis, where the plant harvests the light energy, sunlight energy, changes it into sugars. And some of those sugars are used to grow and reproduce. Some of them are stored in the flowers and the fruit, and some of them are actually leaked from the roots to feed the plant growth promoting rhizobacteria. But on top of photosynthesis, there's other pigments. And a lot of times we neglect that. Right here at the 460 nanometer wavelength, that's for the absorption for the carotenoids. They harvest some of that energy of the sun, and they transport it, the electrons, for energy, for photosynthesis. They ship those electrons to the reaction centers. But they also help protect the plant against free radicals. And you're pushing your plants, you're pushing them to their limits and their stress. If you get too much stress, the plants start making reactive oxygen species as byproducts of photosynthesis. And those tear down membranes and the cells. That's where you start getting that heat stress. When the plant starts growing into the light, they start to yellow, they start to turn white. That's because the free radicals are breaking down the chloroplast membranes where the colors are. So we want to protect those membranes. And part of that protection is the colors and the aromas that the plants make that sponge those free radicals. Well, the 460 nanometer wavelength, that's sky blue. Plants have evolved to see the sky. If they're in the shade, they stretch because they need to get above the other plants in the canopy, or they lean toward a break in the canopy because plants compete for the light. But once they get enough of the blue, once they see the sky, they stop stretching. So if you have a good full spectrum light, the right intensity, with plenty of blue during veg, the plants will be short and stocky, they'll have thicker stems, they'll have more dark green foliage, because blue is responsible for chlorophyll production, green pigment, more than any other color. You look at the leaves under the microscope, the stomata, those are the pores that bring in the CO2. For photosynthesis, there'll be more of them, denser, closer together, just because of that blue light. Also the cuticle cells, the waxy covering on the leaves, they'll be thicker if you have that good full spectrum light with extra blue in it. Also, it's responsible for what's called phototropism. That's where the plant leans toward the light. Well, the plant actually isn't leaning toward the light. It's only leaning toward blue in that very narrow wavelength, right around 460, 470 nanometers. So they want to see the sky. So that's the secret of some of the horticultural grow lights that we have. A regular warehouse high pressure sodium bulb has almost no blue. And because of that, that would be the worst light to use indoors. Because the lack of the blue, plants would be tall and spindly, not very much dark green foliage, and be poor producers. So the quality of light, number one, right from the beginning, with that extra blue light. The next part of that, of course, during the vegetative growth, you want long days. Hope we all know that. 16-hour days. Once you get over 17 and a half, you're wasting a little electricity. Some people don't mind, but 16 to 18 hours would be the max I would do during vegetative growth. They don't need to have a dark period, but when you turn off the lights, it cools down the plant. It gives the plant some time to use some of that stored energy in a healthy way that you did from the day. Because you get over 17 hours, you don't have 17 hours in nature very often in very many places, so they don't know what to do with all that extra light, so they start shutting down photosynthesis anyway. Okay, so you want to have full spectrum light, you want good air movement, you also want to make sure that you don't plant one of the biggest mistakes for yield, planting your plants too close together. Too dense, I'll just stuff some more in here. You fill up this space. If the leaves start to cross each other, they're shading each other out. And when the light goes through the leaf, it's absorbing the red and the blue end of the spectrum. the green goes through. And that green light for the bottom leaves literally shuts down the stomata. That's, in nature, there's a reason. If they shut down the stomata, those pores in the leaves, then the plant is able to take up water all the way to the top leaves where they need it the most. So, but if they get more of the blue, you get the blue light on them, where you get it nice and open, then the blue literally stimulates the stomata to open up, to take in more CO2. So that's something. If we overcrowd, you're going to limit your production on those plants. But just enough so the leaves aren't crossing. Also good air movement. If they're too crowded, it's a jungle. The air can't flow through there. You're going to get your relative humidity is going to be really high by your plants, even if it's not in the room. You want a relative humidity between 40 and 60% without big fluctuations. Try to keep it fairly even. You know, really high humidity one day and really low humidity the next. Not good for the plant. So also, if there's high humidity, the plant doesn't transpire as much water. If you pull up the water with the minerals, then they transpire it out of the top of the plant. It evaporates. It's called transpiration. And if you have stagnant air, without that air movement, that water vapor will build up as a vapor barrier on the bottom of the leaves. And then it clogs up the stomata. The plant can't take up CO2 anymore. The plants can't transpire water anymore. They're not taking up the minerals. Slows everything down, or could even create deficiencies. If you get too high humidity, you'll get a calcium deficiency. Even if there's plenty of calcium in your fertilizer. So relative humidity, air movement to wash away or to blow away the excess air, opened up so that all the leaves are getting the light, and at the right amount of time. You're 16, 18 hours a day. That's the main thing for the environment. Let's talk a little bit about the lighting though. Since light's the limiting factor, let's talk a little bit about the light recipes. During vegetative growth, when you're first starting clones, when you're first starting seedlings, all you need is a couple of fluorescent bulbs. You don't need a lot of light early on. I like to do 4 fluorescents, not 2. You know, so in the little bit more light, and I want full spectrum light even when I'm doing little tender seedlings. Mostly blue, because you don't want them to start stretching. A little bit of red though stimulates root production early on. So full spectrum fluorescents are fine, just to get them going. Guys, once the first true leaves appear and they're starting to get into the vegetative growth stage, they need more light. We can go up to the T5 high output fluorescence then. An 8-bulb fixture is 420 watts. You can get them in the 6500 Kelvin. That's blue, good idea. Or you can add a couple 3000 Kelvin bulbs to it, just to widen the spectrum a little bit, give them a little bit of red with the blue. You keep it just a few inches, 6 inches above the growing tips. The plants will be all the light they need. They'll be short and stocky again, nice thick stems. Later on, another option is metal halide. A 400 watt metal halide light will cover about a 4 foot by 4 foot area, and you raise the light as the plants grow. So you keep it close and raise the light. I've done side-by-side tests over the years with the T5 fluorescence or the metal halide. They're both the same, so it's just personal preference at that point. I used to use the metal halide because they didn't even have high output fluorescence when I started 20 years ago.
Did you find out your metal halide later they grew faster? With
No.
1,000 or 400?
Well, I was just doing, for veg, I just did 400 watt lights, because I was able to huddle the plants together and raise it up. But there's another one I like to do a little bit later in veg. I do like, lately, the dual arc. The dual arc has a 400 watt metal halide and a 600 watt sodium. Now at that point, you're getting more red than blue, but you're also conditioning the plant to want to switch over to flowering too. So there's lots of blue there to keep them from stretching, but there's also a lot of reds and far reds that, because plants measure their age from dusk to dusk, from far red to far red. So if you have that little extra red, now we're getting toward the transition period, then they know they're getting older and they need to start preparing themselves to go to flower for the next generation. So dual arc is good, but that's 1,000 watts. It's going to be hotter. So you need to air cool and you need to keep them fruiting in the plant, especially early on. They have to be at least a couple of feet, 2 or 3 feet above. During fruiting and flowering, still high pressure sodium is the #1 bulb. It's stronger in the red end of the spectrum. Just remember, like I said earlier though, if you're going to try to grow all the way through with high pressure sodium, you need to invest in a horticultural lamp that has that a little bit of blue at the 460 nanometer wavelength. Just enough to keep them from stretching. The other choice, not lately, is the double-ended lamps. Have you seen much interest in those lately? A lot of interest. They're very bright. They have an increased spectrum. You can get a suntan under those lights. You can. And later in flowering, and this isn't about quality, but the blue end of the spectrum and that little bit of the ultraviolet that's available, that's there too, UVA, UVB, it stimulates the plant to make more resins. It stimulates the production of medicinal compounds and also of vitamins and colors. You know, the blue, the ultraviolet to blue part of the spectrum stimulates the precursor molecules for the anthocyanins. Anthocyanins are the purple pigments. So if you want more color, toward the end, add a little more blue and ultraviolet, you're going to get better colors. I did purple basil one year. I did 1,000-watt metal halide lights that had extra blue in them. They were cool deluxe. It was the purplest of the purple basil I've ever grown. It was beautiful indoors. It looked better than anything I'd ever grown outdoors because of that extra blue with a little ultraviolet. So that is, again, part of that process of creating light recipes at the right stage of the plant's growth. For supplemental light, this is the new thing. Adding LEDs in those specific colors. You can get LED lights now that are high output, they're just the blue. And you can add it during veg. You could add the reds during fruiting and flowering. And, or you could add just the ultraviolet or just the far reds. The far reds, if you just, one of the experiments that they're doing now in the Netherlands with the light recipes, right before the lights go off, or right when the lights are going off, they do a flash of far red light for about 15 minutes. And it shuts down the plant for the night very quickly. They go to sleep, puts them to sleep. If you didn't give them the flash of far reds, they'll still go to sleep, but it might take 2.5 hours before they're shut down for the night. So the new experiments are maybe, I'm not going to be definitive yet, maybe if we give them that flash of far reds like the sunset, all we're doing is replicating nature. As the sun goes down, it's more reds, right? It goes below the surface. There's more far reds than reds, and the plant knows it's time to go to sleep. It turns off some of the biologically active molecules for the night. And maybe if we put the plants to sleep earlier, we can wake them up earlier in the morning and still have the short day effect on the plants. And we can do more light without, still stimulate flowering. That will transfer into more yield as well. So these are some of the things they're doing in the Netherlands. Also, one of the very cool things I like the most is the interlighting. Interlighting with LEDs. Here you can't see real well, but we have the big, large crops, big plants, and we're putting the LEDs in specific frequencies down lower in the canopy. So for example, let's say I take some of that blue that opens up the stomata. What if I put that down below? The stomata open up, more of the canopy is going to be photosynthetically active. So if you're adding CO2, you can open up all the stomata deeper in the canopy. They're going to be taking in more carbon dioxide. If you have the intensity on the top, say those say the double-ended lights, more sugars, more yield. Right? Yes, question?
I'm using high pressure sodiums overhead and I'm doing side lighting with a mix mix of 36 or 64 T5s on the sides, just toward this very end. Is this the kind of thing you're talking about? Will this help open stomata and
Well, especially for side lighting, because there's not a whole lot of light. You'll see that, you know, toward the edge, the plants aren't going to be as developing as well as
my
right
room's
underneath
not all
the
that
light.
dense, so I mean,
Yeah.
the plants are pretty.
Okay. But yeah, it's the same concept.
That's
We're
what I'm
adding
trying to
different,
do.
adding an extra spectrums. But the LEDs now are going to be the new thing. That's what the Philips is working on in the Netherlands. And the prices are going down. Prices are going down, and they have a wider palette of colors to choose from. So,
Yeah, they're very cheap.
so that's a good thing. Okay, so you could add the far red, you could add the blues, you could add the ultraviolet, just at the right time. Still, they're still using, if you see up here in this picture, they still have the HID lights as their main light source. And then the LEDs are just to have a physiological effect on the plant. It's called photomorphogenesis. They don't need a lot of light. They just give them those specific frequencies, and it affects the genetics of the plant. And in the industry, that's a good point too, genetics. There's no substitute for genetics. You know, just can't do it. What we're trying to do as growers is help the plant reach its genetic potential. But you're not going to grow giant pumpkins with the regular pumpkin seeds from the drugstore. You know, you want things that are bred for yield. So some strains are going to be high yielders, some are going to have other characteristics you want. That's where you have to decide. Am I really going for yield? Go for the genetics that are high yielders, and then do the environment to help them become, do the best that they can. But we think we know the genetic potential of plants, and it turns out, though, a lot of times we don't. That's what we're going to get into next. Carbon dioxide, so light is the limiting factor. Once you have enough light, CO2 becomes the next limiting factor. The ambient air, around 350 parts per million. So we want fresh air, at least with the minimum 350. If we're indoors and it's a tight room, if it goes down to 200 parts per million, because the plant's using it up, it's going to slow down the growth. If it's depleted down to 100 parts per million, the plants won't even grow. They'll just stop growing. They need CO2 for fuel with the light. And if you have, okay, over 450, it will have a positive effect on the plants. And between 750 and 1500, you can get 35 to 50% increase in yield. 3 elements, hydrogen, carbon, oxygen, and carbon dioxide and water. Those 3 elements account for 95% of the plant's dry weight. So you want yield, CO2. With the CO2, even on lower light, you'll still get the 30 to 50% increase in yield or growth, but if they're only growing like this, 30% more is this. If you have really good light, and if they're growing like this, 30% more is like this. So the light with the CO2, if you really want the yield. And that's the secret of the Dutch growers, right there. If you go over 1,500 parts per million, you're not going to get increased yield anymore. It's just wasting CO2 at that point. As they get over 1,500, they're going to start to close the stomata. So it's sort of counterproductive. You're wasting it. If you go over 5,000 parts per million, you're actually hurting the plant. It'll look like fertilizer burn. You'll start seeing brown on the edge of the leaves, just like it was fertilizer. So over 5,000 ppm is not just counterproductive, but harmful. Okay, here's an example of the big boys. This is in Wilcox, Arizona, 200 acres under glass. 200 acres. You see that little, I don't know if you can see them, you see the little dots here? Those are the big end of the base.
Probably it's really hard to see the screen because there's so much ambient light.
Yeah, there was no way to turn those off.
We got to shut off all the lights in the whole building.
Okay, well, I won't spend a whole lot of time on pictures, but if you could see it, there's it's all the way down to the horizon. Greenhouses, one after another after another. Then you go around the curve here, as far as you can see the other direction. 200 acres under glass. This is looking down one row. This little dot right here is a person about halfway down the row walking toward us. It took about 10 minutes to get to us. That's how big this is. And they're supplementing CO2 up to 2,000 parts per million for 200 acres. Yeah, they're laughing. Imagine 200 acres under glass, and you're at 2,000 parts per million all the way through that greenhouse complex. They had huge boilers, size as this room, and what they would do is the computer would measure the accumulated sunlight. It had photosensors every 10 minutes, and it would adjust the irrigation and it would adjust the CO2 levels according to how much accumulated sunlight the plants had received. That's how they were getting that super yield, though, because as the light was getting stronger, they were automatically dosing more CO2 up to a limit of 2,000 ppm. They were burning. Oh wow, you can't even see that slide at all. That was my art slide. Beautiful in the dark. Well, I'll sell you the prints afterwards.
Oh, okay.
You know, when you burn natural gas, it has this beautiful blue flame. Well, they were creating pure CO2. And the pure CO2 is, when you burn the natural gas, the byproduct is carbon dioxide and water vapor. So, but it was so pure though, if someone even lit a cigarette in front of the boiler, the computer would sense the carbon monoxide levels going up from your cigarette, shut down the whole boiler. That's how it was. So they were burning the CO2 during the day. They're in Arizona, or burning the natural gas for CO2 during the day. But what about the heat? You're making all the heat burning the natural gas. What they did is they pumped hot water into storage tanks in the desert, insulated tanks, and then during the day, or during the night, they would pump the hot water through pipes between the rows of tomatoes to warm it up. In fact, the computer would measure the accumulated sunlight for the whole day, and it would adjust the nighttime temperatures according to how much light the plants received the previous day. Because if there's a lot of light, and they've stored up a lot of sugars, then they can raise the temperature at night to burn some of those off for growth. If it was cool and overcast during the day, they'd lower the nighttime temperatures because there wasn't that much stored energy to convert into growth. The idea was they wanted to keep a nice 2-inch internodal length all the way up the plant. Because if you have 6 inches of stretching, that's less production. 6 inches, 12 inches, so 2 inches over and over, so you get leaf, leaf, bract of fruit, leaf, leaf, bract of fruit, all the way up. And they were doing 50-foot vines in this greenhouse. So they were pumping the water through there, and they were also using them as a track for their carts. So anyway, that's something for us to know too, is the difference between day and night temperatures. You don't want more than 10% difference, or 10 degrees difference in day and night temperature. The greater the difference, the more stretching. It'll burn up that energy and stretch. So you want to keep it closer, within 10 degrees, even tighter if you want tighter nodes, is the best. And you don't want your relative humidity to swing too much either. You're better off having a little on the high side, say 60% relative humidity, or even 70, which is pretty darn high, but all the time. Then have it 70 and then go down. Powdery mildew, for example, if you start to get it, and then you lower your relative humidity, it just causes the powdery mildew to sporulate and spread. And that's a big one. Oh, look, I'm getting a little powdery mildew. Oh, I better get my humidity down. So they lower it too much, and it's everywhere then. So you want to control your humidity before you have the problem and get it in the right zone. Okay, so I guess that's it for that. Then they were getting 52 kilos per square meter in that greenhouse at that time. 52 kilos of tomatoes per 3x3 area for 200 acres
That's huge.
per year. That's yield. Now, one thing about the yield, I asked them, I said, well, what? This is hydroponics. They were growing in rock wool. One little 3-foot slab of rock wool can grow 4 full-grown tomato plants with 50-foot vines, and they'll never get root bound. And they were using the same slab of rock wool for 2 crops. So, because it's the perfect benefit, the benefit is the perfect combination of oxygen and water holding capacity. And it's zero cation exchange, so all the minerals are available all the time. So that's what the professional growers use for big yield. They'll use rock wool for long-term crops, big plants. That's what I'm using at home right now. I decided to go back to doing rock wool slabs, and I'll never have to worry about it getting root bound.
Rock wool, a little bit better than these root riots?
Rock wool,
Right.
well, root riots or rock wool are fine for starting seeds or cutting, either one. I'm talking about a slab 3 feet long by about 8 inches wide, maybe 2 inches deep, and that little bit of rock wool could grow 4 full-grown tomatoes with 50-foot vines. And it's almost impossible to overwater it and kill it, but I just do irrigation cycles with it. So I just let it dry out a little bit between waterings. Okay, EC. In the hydroponics, low to medium EC stimulates vegetative growth. Medium to high EC restricts vegetative growth. So you want to find that right EC, so you get that, you don't want stretching, you just want that 2-inch over and over again. But during fruiting and flowering, there's a direct proportional relationship between your EC, that's the strength of the minerals, how concentrated they are, and sugar content in the fruit. So I go for the best of the best quality. I go for very high EC, the highest I can do, stress the plant. Maybe the leaves will curl a little bit, but I can double the lycopene content, the red color, so it's red all the way through. I can increase vitamin C by 50%. And so by a little bit of higher EC, you're going to restrict it, choke the plant. Make it harder for the plant to take up water, but they will make more antioxidants, more of the vitamins to protect themselves, more of the colors to protect themselves, more of the flavanols to protect themselves. So I go for very high. And when I was in that greenhouse, I said, well, what EC do you run? Well, he said 22 to 24 CF. That's medium. I said, well, what do you do? He goes, I know. If I raise the EC, I'll get better quality. He said, but Americans, all they want is a tomato that fits on a hamburger bun. Then slather it with ketchup for flavor. So they're going for optimal yield. So they're not stressing the plant. They're encouraging the vegetative growth, and they're doing just enough so they can get some good fruit production too. My tomatoes, though, well, I'll do them every time. Because I have almost double the ECs that they do under the right conditions. But that's for yield. If you want yield, you're going to have to find that just barely at the stress zone to get good, acceptable quality, but higher yield. So that's what you have to find out for yourself with your varieties. Okay, next, full spectrum nutrients. Now we have our lights right. We have our light recipes dialed in as intense as we can without too much temperature. If the temperature gets too high under those lights, the plants go into what's called photorespiration because they burn up all the CO2 that's in the leaf, and then the plant's going to start assimilating oxygen instead of carbon dioxide. In fact, it will do photosynthesis, but it will actually produce carbon dioxide instead of store it. So it's very inefficient. You've seen it. If you get too much light, get over 1,500 micromoles, or too much heat, the plants seem to stall under the lights. And actually the plants a little further away do better, or the leaves and branches a little further away do better, if you've seen that for yourself. That's called photorespiration. So we want the right amount of light, even, and just enough so it doesn't burn the plant and turn the yellow. Okay, we have the CO2, supplementation, good relative humidity, good airflow. Now in Now for the roots, minerals. You want to do a combination of minerals and organic biostimulants. I call that biohydroponics. The minerals, if you want to just spoon feed your plant, are mined from the earth, processed into water-soluble ionic form. That's the form that's immediately available to the plant. They can be used to treat or prevent deficiencies and also to steer the crop. You can make it a little more vegetative, make it a little more generative, improve the quality, and do things to improve bricks. The other part, though, which you have all the essential elements, is the organic biostimulants. The organic biostimulants stimulate the uptake of water and minerals. And the more efficiently plants take up water and minerals, the more chemical reactions they can do, the faster they can grow. So we want to have all the right minerals in the right proportion, but we want to help the plant take those minerals up more efficiently. They will also increase the plant's natural resistance to pest and disease. The more efficiently plants take up water and minerals, the higher the bricks, the higher the sugar content in the sap. That's stored energy to grow and stored energy to fight off problems if the plant has a problem later on. So we want high bricks plants. That's where we have to be careful. If we overdo it with our nitrogen because we want really massive top growth, we could deplete the carbohydrates that they need for root growth. And then later on, when they need that good root mass, take up phosphorus and potassium to make flowers, they're not going to be able to do it as well. So they can slow that transition down from growing to bloom, and it can affect your yield in the end. So we were looking for balanced growth early on, strong, healthy plants, good root mass, and then they can support a bumper crop of fruit and flowers. So also the biostimulants generally improve quality and yield. Biohydroponics in Holland, that's back in 2000, in the Netherlands they made fungicides illegal on all food crops. So overnight, the growers were losing 40% of their crops to powdery mildew, gray mold, those kind of other fungal problems. They couldn't use fungicides anymore. They had hoop houses with high humidity. It wasn't the perfect environment. Cool temperatures, overcast, perfect for powdery mildew, right? Well, they started using biostimulants products. They were coming in from Germany. They went from losing 40% of the crop to losing 0. And they got a 10% increase in yield over any past year. I actually did a television interview with the Dutch grower, and he told me that himself. I read the report later that said 20% increase in yield. They were doing the test for the Dutch government. So there's a way you can actually increase quality and yield. And also, they were first in the line for sugar content in the fruit. So not only did they eliminate fungicides, increased yield, but they were the best quality berries in the Netherlands at that time. And they were only adding 6 parts per million of organic biostimulant to it. So that's the idea. Give it the right mineral balance and then stimulate the uptake of the minerals. I asked them what was in it and how it worked. They wouldn't tell me. I said, well, we need this in the United States. We need to be able to use less fungicides and pesticides to increase quality and yield. Some of our food right now, you get a tomato in the winter here in Michigan, it has no flavor. And we need high bricks. We need nutrient-dense food with more flavors and more nutrition. What's in this? Sorry. 10 years of research and development. That's proprietary. I can't tell you.
Develop it yourself.
So, if any of you have taken my classes in the past, you'll know something about me. My mother gave me a very great gift. Well, sometimes it's a curse, sometimes it's a gift. It's called intellectual curiosity. I was the firstborn in my family. That's a little advantage. Guys out there, because there was 3 other little kids that they had to take care of at the same time. So when I went through the why mom, asked the question, why? She kept going. She worked with me on that. She was patient. And I never stopped asking questions. So when I asked why, what's in this, how does it work? And they say, I can tell you, I became obsessed. It took me 5 years of intense research and development, diving into microbiology, plant physiology, plant nutrition. I was looking at organics. I knew the answer was in nature. Just wanted to know where to look. 5 years later, I solved the mystery. that long. I went back to the Netherlands to talk to them on another project. Told them about my experiments I was doing with amino acids, with the 7 primary chelators. They said, you know more about our products than we do. And they started pumping me for information. You know what I told them?
Sorry, I can't help you.
That's proprietary. It took me 5 years of research and development to find that. Because I said, I'm experimenting with the 7 primary amino acid chelates. They said, oh, what are the 7 primary acid chelates? Because they just threw a whole bunch of amino acids. And I had it, but I'll tell you too. And I'm going to tell you guys today too. Because I want everyone to know this. We need this as gardeners too. We have problems with powdery mildew. How much do we lose in yield to powdery mildew? The yield. Hopefully none. But if you get it, it's a race to harvest, right? Because you don't want to contaminate your food. Well, here's the answer. Combining minerals and organic biostimulants. Amino acids improve the uptake of calcium. That's the key to growing plants that are resistant to powdery mildew. When the plant takes up calcium, it reacts with pectic acid in the leaf and stem to make what's called pectin. That's the glue that glues the cell walls together. So, if I add amino acids to the nutrient solution with the calcium, it literally stimulates root cells to open up calcium ion channels. So instead of 1 ion at a time going into the plant, 1,000 ions at a time go into the plant and are taken up in the transpiration stream. So the plant, instead of having water in the interstitial space, it has pectin and calcium pectate in the interstitial space. So when a powdery mildew spore lands on a leaf, it wants to send out a germination tube to penetrate the cells and get to the water in the interstitial space. And then it becomes systemic and spreads. The water on the surface of the leaf doesn't matter. You could literally wash powdery mildew spores off the surface of the leaf with water. That won't germinate. But it gets into the tissue, into the water. But if I use amino acids and stimulate more calcium uptake instead of water, it has pectin. So by the time the germination tube penetrates the leaf, those thicker cells, stronger cell walls, it dries up and dies. That's how they reduced the losses from 40% to 0. They didn't kill the fungus, they prevented the fungus from getting established and spreading. So that is the key. Now the other part with that, the plant's taking up more calcium because of the amino acids. You're going to get thicker stems, stronger cell walls. You're going to have a stronger vascular system. So the plant takes up water and all of the other minerals more efficiently. In my lab work with amino acids, I did leaf samples, sent them to the lab. Every element was accumulating to higher levels than the control without the amino acids because of a stronger vascular system. It's a side effect. Amino acids don't have calcium in it, but it stimulates the plant to take up calcium. It also keeps it from getting locked up in the soil. So if any of you ever use a CalMag product, then add amino acids with it. If you're just using organic nutrition that has bone meal and rock phosphate, add amino acids with it. It'll feed the microorganisms. It'll also help the plant take up the calcium that's locked up. So either way, if you're using any calcium, organic or hydroponic, add amino acids. By the way, in nature, how can plants grow without amino acids if we don't give it to them? The microorganisms make amino acids. They make that when they're dividing on the roots, something like Bacillus subtilis or some other ones too, they're dividing, they make enzymes, digestive enzymes. And one of those enzymes is called protease, enzyme that breaks down proteins into amino acids. So microbes are making amino acids right on the surface of the root. And then once they get that glutamic acid and glycine, the plant says, oh, I'm in healthy soil. Let's grow. Open up the calcium ion channel, take it up. Plants are off to the races. So they were not just making more disease-resistant plants, though. The plant was taking up water and minerals more efficiently, more chemical reactions, higher bricks. The bricks is off the scale for premium quality. That's how they did both. So there was your one lesson for today that took me 5 years of sleepless nights, and I gave it to you guys today for free.
What product has a lot of amino acids?
Well, you can talk to these guys after. There's several products on the shelves here. They're amino acid blends that are very nice. I'll let them make recommendations. There is a raw omina. It's just amino acid blend with nothing else in it. That's pretty nice as well. So there's several choices that those guys can talk about for your grow.
I walked in a minute late or two, but you mentioned hybrids or creating hybrids.
Yeah, we're talking about it.
You're not talking about the product hybrid.
No, the hybrix is molasses. We'll talk a little about molasses at the end. That's more for just finishing up and ripening, but we'll get to that at the end of the show. No, it's not just about giving the plant sugars. It's about stimulating the plant to make more sugar. You know, someone once told me feeding sugar to a plant is like feeding milk to a cow. You know, a cow makes milk. The job of a plant to make sugar. What we want to do is stimulate the plant to make more sugar, to store it up, and to use for energy to grow, to increase yield. Okay, let's move on. Let's look at the base nutrients quickly, whether they're from hydroponics or soil. How many of you are hydroponics growers? Sometimes. How many are soil? Okay. Yeah, we still have a lot of soil growers here. Plants need 17 essential elements, whether you're giving it to them in organics or in soil. But plants can't take up large organic molecules. They have to be broken down by microorganisms in the soil to make them available to the plant. So if you're growing in soil or soilless medium, the thing that would really help a lot would be to add an inoculant. To inoculate your roots at transplant with plant growth promoting rhizobacteria. And then they make the biostimulants. And they'll help make the minerals that are available to your plant. Where in hydroponics, we just give them the mineral directly in water-soluble form. Okay, so nitrogen, remember that's the growth element. In the first half of the plant's growth, the plant assimilates 80% of the nitrogen it needs for the whole life of the plant. So a vegetative growth formula will be proportionally higher in nitrogen. And this is what we're going to spend a little time on this in a few minutes. But nitrogen, regulating your nitrate to ammonium ratio, regulating nitrogen fertilizers are going to be one of the biggest thing that will contribute to yield after light and CO2. Getting the right nitrogen, the right amount, and the right form if you want to maximize yields. And you'll see at the farmers, there's a lot of emphasis on yield when they add more nitrogen to the soil. Plants take it up more than any other mineral. But you overdo it with nitrogen and you create problems. So we'll talk about that in a few minutes. Phosphorus is the energy element. It energizes the rooting process and it energizes the flowering process. So you use that a little extra phosphorus, little amount of ammonium phosphate, that first few weeks, you can get up to 20% more root growth in transplant. So that touch of phosphorus. Commercial growers that want big yields, they don't have just a grow formula and a bloom like we do as hobbyists. They have a starter fertilizer too. And a starter fertilizer has a little extra monoammonium phosphate in it because you're going to energize the rooting, better root strike, better establishment of the plant. And the plant takes in a lot of phosphorus in those first few weeks too. And then it uses it to make energy molecules. And then when the phosphorus is recycled in the plant. As the plant takes in more energy, they build phosphate bonds, and then when they break the phosphate bonds, they release the energy. So the beginning, first 3 weeks, a little extra phosphorus, do a lot for your plant. Also at the very beginning of flowering. You get more earlier flowering, and you'll get more flowering sites. And that adds up to increased yield as well. So those are the 2 times to spoon feed a little extra phosphorus. Bloom formulas are higher in phosphorus and potassium. Potassium is the health element. It's used for carbohydrate metabolism to make the sugars for the bricks as a catalyst. And So a good growth formula will have about 1.5 times potassium as the nitrogen. Even though they need a lot of nitrogen, they still need phosphorus with it for energy. But a bloom formula will have twice the potassium as the nitrogen. Calcium, we just talked about that, how important that is. But one thing I will say in addition, calcium is a passive element. It's only taken up in the transpiration stream. So as the plant's taking up water, it takes the calcium with it, and it transpires the water from the leaves. It keeps the calcium flowing all the way to the end of the leaves. So if you have high relative humidity, calcium deficiency. It'll show up in the new growth, the new bud development, as deformed growth at the top of the plant, because the calcium didn't make it all the way to the edge of the plant. It'll show up as tip burn in lettuce. It'll show up as blossom end rot in tomatoes. You can have plenty of calcium there, but the plants take it up. And what else did we say to improve calcium uptake? What else can we do? Amino acids, right? That's the secret of nature at the roots to get the plant to take up more calcium. Instead of 1 ion at a time, 1,000 ions. Real strong plants. Magnesium is the central element in chlorophyll. It's what makes plants green. I'll say a little thing here. The chemical structure of chlorophyll is almost exactly the same as the chemical structure of hemoglobin in red blood cells, at least at the central of the molecules. The difference is the central element of chlorophyll is magnesium, makes plants green. The central element of hemoglobin is iron, makes blood red. Other than that, they're pretty close together. In fact, iron is a catalyst for chlorophyll production. So there's a lot more similarity. I'm getting too excited here. Throwing things around. My wife won't let me work with aggressive chemicals. I can't play with nitric acid. She won't let me do it. So I thought you take a class and get certified to handle aggressive acids. No. No, you're not taking the class. No. Why? Why? I know how clumsy you are. Even if you follow the protocols, you're going to get hurt. So anyway, I threw the thing. What was this thing? Magnesium. Okay. Magnesium makes plants green. So if you get a magnesium deficiency, it'll show up as intervenal chlorosis. Because yellowing. Chlorosis is yellowing. The bottom leaves, the veins will stay green, but the tissue between the veins start to turn yellow. So if there's a magnesium deficiency, magnesium is mobile. The plant will take it out of the bottom leaves, send it to the top leaves where it's needed the most. Now, magnesium also is very important with metabolism of the plant, releasing energy of the plant. So when you see magnesium deficiencies, it's normally when the energy needs of the plants are highest. Rapid growth, maybe transitions phase from grow to bloom, where there's a lot of hormonal stress on the plant to make those changes. A lot of times you'll start to see magnesium deficiency. During heavy fruiting and flowering, you need a lot of energy to store in the flowers and in the fruit. You can get magnesium deficiency. Bottom leaves, veins are green, they turn yellow. Magnesium works along with phosphorus. Remember I said plant takes in phosphorus, it stores energy in the phosphate bonds. It's a molecule called ATP, benzene triphosphate. But in biology, we call it magnesium ATP because magnesium orients the ATP molecule so the phosphate bonds can be cleaved. And when they cleave them, it releases energy, and the phosphorus is transferred to another molecule for the next chemical reaction. So magnesium works very well. When the energy needs are highest, the magnesium needs are highest. So there's another way you can spoon feed. Sulfur contributes to the aroma of flowers. And it's also part of some vitamins. I rarely see in hydroponics, rarely need to add extra sulfur because we add the magnesium as magnesium sulfate. So that alone has 5 times more magnesium or sulfur than the plants need. So you don't have to add extra. Although toward the end of flowering, it's a good idea to add more, supplement with potassium and also supplement with magnesium. and then you won't get the leaves won't turn yellow at the bottom of the plant. In the magnesium sulfur. When the plant takes in the sulfates, it takes them in at the chloroplasts, the same place where photosynthesis is done. It's an extension of photosynthesis. Plant takes in the sulfur, it changes it into amino acid called cysteine. 4 cysteine molecules combined with 1 zinc ion inside the plant. It makes what's called a zinc finger transcription factor. What happens is that molecule goes into the cell, into the nucleus, attaches to the DNA, and activates, turns on a series of genes that tells the plant, don't make more stems and leaves, make flowering parts. So that's the extra sulfur is part of the flowering process. That's part of the secret of the bloom stimulants that they're using overseas that work at the genetic level. It's, but in fact, between accumulating sulfates and nitrates, over 50% of the energy of photosynthesis goes to assimilate those 2 elements. So at the beginning, you give it stronger nitrates for strong, healthy, big plant, would then cut back on the nitrates during bloom, add more magnesium sulfate, more potassium sulfate, and you'll get a better flowering process and more yields. That's the one little way you can manipulate your grow. Next comes the trace elements. They activate enzymes in the plant. An enzyme is part of does the chemistry of life, does chemical reactions. In fact, it's all controlled by the genetic code. Here's your genetics 101 lesson for the day. 1 gene equals 1 enzyme. It makes an enzyme, and that enzyme does chemical reactions. When a plant makes an enzyme, a lot of those enzymes have to be turned on by the plant, or they're inactive. They don't do chemistry. And many of them are turned on by iron, copper, manganese, or zinc. Those ions that turn on to that enzyme, some of those are able to do over 1,000 chemical reactions per second in a cell, just 1 enzyme, if it's turned on. So the trace elements are key for maximizing yield. You use a very small amount, but they're essential. If they turn on the enzymes, they're going to have a dramatic effect on yield. That's one of the secrets of the biostimulants. You know, they're activating and they're stimulating the production of enzymes by the plant, and they're activating the enzymes that are made.
What will cause a stem to start turning purple?
Purple stems are typically phosphorus deficiency is my first guess on that. It could be nitrogen, but usually phosphorus. And also temperature. If the temperatures at the roots are too low, it's in the 50s, then the plant doesn't take up phosphorus. Phosphorus is active transport. It has to have stored carbohydrates in the roots, and it has to be warm enough in the roots for the plant to burn the carbohydrates and take up the phosphorus and take up the potassium. It's kind of a thermostat for the plant. And nature made it that way. You know, if they take up too much phosphorus and potassium too early, and then you get they want to go to flower, and then you get frost. It's the end of the line for the genes. So plants have adapted to wait till the root temperatures are warmer before to go into that full flowering. So both of those things, too cold a temperatures will cause purpling, and not enough phosphorus.
Will some of them naturally turn purple?
And then there's genetics.
All right.
And then genetics, there's some plants are just, like my purple basil, they're going to be purple the whole time.
Right.
Whether it's not a deficiency, it's just natural. So you have to know your strains as well. Okay, give you a couple examples. Nickel is a trace element. It activates an enzyme called urease that they need to change urea into ammonium. Okay, very small amount. Molybdenum is used in nitrogen metabolism. You only use a very, very small amount of molybdenum. We're talking, when I make a nutrient formula from scratch, a fraction of a milligram per liter. Not even 1 part per million. It's a fraction of a part per million. But without it, your yield will suffer. I'll give you an example. In Australia, the land is naturally deficient in molybdenum. So they used to be a wheat importing nation, because they couldn't make enough wheat. Once they discovered that about molybdenum, they just added a little bit, a trace amount of molybdenum with the fertilizers. Now they're a wheat exporting nation. So yes, you don't use very much, but it's essential. Of the rest of these, zinc makes the growth hormones, but the most important ones to me are iron, copper, manganese, and zinc, because they activate enzymes for metabolism, where they're burning and releasing stored energy to grow. So those are really important. And to keep that, your iron, manganese, copper, and zinc available to the plant, watch your pH. If the pH gets above 6.5, you start to get an iron deficiency. If you get above 7.5 in hydroponics, then you'll start all of them, iron, copper, manganese, zinc. You can put them in there, the plant can't use them. So that's the most important one. Iron is another very important one out of all of them. They use more iron than they do any of the other trace elements. Because iron is a catalyst for chlorophyll production, to make the green pigment that harvests the energy from your lights. So if you can keep that iron flowing, the plant's going to be more efficient in making sugars, and you'll get better yields. And the Dutch fertilizers, the Dutch blends out there, are notorious for being too low in iron. Because in the Netherlands, it's zero runoff. They don't dump the wasted nutrient solution down the drain. They clean the water, and then they take a nutrient test, they put back in what the plant took out. Nothing goes down the drain. But to do that, they want to have to clean the water, so you don't start getting root diseases like Pythium building up. So when they clean it, they're using ultraviolet sterilization of the nutrient, and ultraviolet light oxidizes iron and manganese. It makes it unavailable to the plant. So if they keep adding more and more iron, they're just burning iron, and that causes trouble to their UV. So they've just said, okay, we'll keep it to just the bottom of adequate levels. And I've seen iron deficiencies. How you'll see it if you have it, it'll show up in the new growth. Since iron is a catalyst for making chlorophyll, they'll be yellowing instead of dark green. In the very new growth, they'll start at the petiole, the base of the stem, and it works its way out the leaf. If we get the pH under control, it usually fixes it, or add a little iron supplement. Like fulvic acid is a good one. Excellent. Excellent one. That's natural chelator for iron. Okay, so I think that's it we want all these in the right proportions. Now the ones that we're going to manipulate, we're going to the nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium for growth. The nitrogen, we said before, the first half of the growth assimilates 80% there. Our plants are nitrogen hogs. They eat a lot of nitrogen. And the nitrogen is available in two forms, either nitrate or ammonium. Early on, when you're just transplanting, plants prefer the ammonium form of nitrogen. That's why that extra monoammonium phosphate that we talked about, a little extra phosphorus, excellent at the beginning. Because the ammonium actually helps the plant take up the phosphorus. So that's a good one for your starter fertilizers the first few weeks. Later on, during heavy vegetative growth, plants prefer the nitrate form of nitrogen. It's stronger and healthier growth for the plant. But it takes energy. It takes up to 25 to 30% of the energy of photosynthesis just to assimilate the nitrates. So we want big plants, but we don't want to put so much nitrate and nitrogen that it burns up the energy for top growth. Oh look, I think I'm going to get a lot of yield, but they're big cells with thin cell walls. They'll track disease. Also, if they burn up all the energy for top growth, the photosynthesis, there's no extra sugars to send to the roots. And remember I said earlier, phosphorus, potassium, active transport, you want to have good strong root development with lots of stored carbohydrates and starches. So when you switch to flour, burns those sugars, the plant takes up more phosphorus and potassium, makes a bumper crop of flowers. So you want to find the sweet spot where you're having not just adequate, but on the middle to almost luxury levels of nitrogen, but not so much that you have imbalanced growth. So my recommendation for beginners to get best yield, start with a half strength nutrient. Because if you're going to make a mistake, it's better to have too little than too much. Because if you got a little bit of a nitrogen deficiency, you just give it one little treatment of nitrogen, the plant will start to respond within 2 or 3 hours that quickly, and the symptoms will go away within a matter of a few days. So if you're going to make a mistake, have too little, and just gradually bump it up to find that spot that's the maximal yield for that particular strain. Also, there are heavy feeders and efficient feeders. On a heavy feeder, you can pour the nitrogen on, it won't give you more, it won't hurt them a bit. Efficient feeders, you can just do light levels of nitrogen and burn them, get fertilizer burn. So you have to know your plants. I can tell you lots of stories, but
Start from the tips out.
we don't have time.
That'll start from the tips out.
The nitrogen deficiency is a general yellowing of the plant. It starts from the bottom and works its way up the plant.
When you start burning them.
Oh, when you burn them, yeah, that's usually fertilizer burn. You're seeing browning on the edge of the leaves. You know, that's really when you've gone too far. If you've gone that far though, with nitrate nitrogen, you're already screwed. Yeah, and if you overdo it, it's toxic nitrogen. You can delay or even prevent flowering. How do I know this? Besides torturing plants, which I do part of my living, is to say, let's see how much they can take before I hurt them. But the very first time I grew tomatoes outdoors, I knew I had so little knowledge, many years ago. I knew nitrogen is good. You know, plants need nitrogen. That's all I knew. So I went down to the store. I looked at the levels with the NPK, the 3 numbers on them. I found the one that had the highest N on it. I said, oh, there we go. That has nitrogen.
Burn them all up.
And then I said, I looked at the directions. Oh, 2 teaspoons per gallon. Well, I want the biggest tomatoes in my whole neighborhood. You know, I'm a beginner, never done it. Well, if 2 is good, then 4 must be twice as good. So I doubled the amount of nitrogen fertilizer, and guess what? It worked. I had the biggest, bushiest, darkest green tomato plants in the whole neighborhood.
How many tomatoes did
What I didn't get was the tomatoes.
you? Yeah.
But I had one heck of a nice tomato bush. Impressed my friends. Actually, toward the end of the season, I started to get a few little green tomatoes just when the frost hit. So that's how I learned my lesson the first time. Yeah, it's not more is better. No. In fact, cut back. Less is better. And then gradually give it more when it needs it. Because you can, if it's a deficiency, just give it a little what it needs, it comes right back. If it's toxic, sometimes all you can really do is start over. It takes so long to correct it. And then you lose your yield too. So that's what we're going to try to do. You want to adjust this ammonium to nitrate ratio. Also the Dutch, remember I showed you that those pictures of that was a Dutch greenhouse in Arizona. That was Hans. The computer automatically doses the nutrients. So if you got a really bright day, lots of good light, like you would from your double-ended bulbs, with the CO2 supplementation all the way at the height, the computer automatically adjusts the ammonium to nitrate ratio. Because under high CO2 and high light, the plants will assimilate the ammonium, but they won't assimilate the nitrates. They'll just be stored in the plant as free nitrates. And that contributes to off flavors and to unhealthy growth. So they raise the ammonium level, high light and high CO2, that's assimilated in the roots, it's changed into amino acids. Those amino acids are built into enzymes, and the plant thrives. So if you're growing under high CO2, lower your nitrates, raise your ammonium. That's what the pros do to increase yields and keep that nice tight internodal length. Okay, phosphorus, we already said early flowering, early rooting, and ammonium phosphate is the best way to do that if it's not organic. The raw phosphorus over there, it's derived from monoammonium phosphate. You put that in water, it dissolves crystal clear, immediately available for the plant. The plant takes it in, it's turned instantly into energy molecules. But you don't want to, don't overdo it with phosphorus. If you overdo it with phosphorus, a phosphorus toxicity shows up as a zinc deficiency. Zinc deficiency first, iron deficiency second, magnesium deficiency third, in that order. It gets worse. So there's a mistake that's being made by growers, because they know, oh, you need that extra phosphorus for yield. So they're using a nutrient that's high in phosphorus, then they add a PK boost that's high in phosphorus, and then they say, well, I like the shooting powder too, which is high in phosphorus. Next thing you know, they have 5 times the phosphorus the plant needs. It locks up the zinc, locks up the iron, and the plant starts to shut down. So what do? Oh, better give it some more phosphorus. That's the biggest problem in hydroponics is over fertilizing. But if you give it a little extra phosphorus at the right time, then it will do good. And just adequate phosphorus the rest of the time.
If you're in soil and you've done that, can you just flush it a little bit?
Well, you can. It's a little bit tougher though. If you overdo it with nitrates, how you take the nitrates out, you can flush them. If you get, nitrates are very water soluble. They're one of the first things to go. You get a heavy rain out in the garden, the nitrates get flushed away. So nitrogen deficiency outdoors is one of the most common deficiencies. Indoors, if we're properly watering our plants, you don't have as much of a problem.
Can you help flush away, if you use that NPK boost, shooting power or whatever, if you use that, and I know you're supposed to pick your spots in flower when you use that, but if you instead of like 2 treatments, you do 3 or 4, and now you hurt yourself.
You can hurt
Can you
yourself.
flush? And knock that back?
Yeah, but phosphorus doesn't flush as nicely.
Okay.
It locks up. It locks up with the calcium to make calcium phosphate. That's what your bones are made out of. That's why in hydroponics you have a 2-part nutrient. All the calcium's in the part A, and all the phosphates and sulfates are in the part B. If you put them together in concentrated form, it makes calcium phosphate, 95% insoluble. It makes limescale. And then the phosphorus is unavailable to the plant and the calcium, so it locks both of them up. But again, your amino acids chelate the calcium, help keep it from reacting with the phosphates. So that would be a helpful thing to keep them soluble. Here in Michigan, the farmers add about 5 times more phosphates than the plant needs, because within a matter of hours or a couple of days, the phosphates get locked up in the soil. So they give them more than the plant needs because they know they're going to get locked up. They want some of it to get to the plant. Now in Michigan, there's so much phosphates in our soils in agriculture, it's saturated levels. You just add manure to the soil and you get a rain, it'll wash it away because it's all locked up. But it'll keep locking up until it hits the saturation point and then it just runs off. So we have to be careful with their phosphorus. In Michigan now, you can't even put phosphorus in a lawn fertilizer unless you're going to start a new lawn. A starter fertilizer, that's going to have in it extra phosphorus. But they don't even allow it in grass formulas anymore in Michigan because of the runoff
Phosphorus
pollution.
really that's causing all these blooms, algae blooms. And
Phosphorus and the nitrogen, both of them, nitrates and phosphates.
This big thing down in Florida with the red tide.
Red tide, you get those blooms.
Same thing.
Look what happened over in Lake Erie. They contaminating the drinking water, and they were saying it was because of fertilizer runoff, nitrates and phosphates. So we want optimal yields, but if we can do it in an intelligent way, that we're giving the plant exactly what they need when they need it, we're going to get the best yields, but we'll protect the environment at the same time. And that's being responsible, in my opinion. And just don't overdo it. Anyway, so ammonium phosphate is good for early rooting, early flowering, or if they just need a little boost of energy if they're starting to stall. Potassium, that's the health element. We talked about that before. It stimulates fruiting and flowering. It's carbohydrate metabolism. During heavy fruiting and flowering stage, plants can deplete potassium to deficient levels in 2 or 3 days. If you're pushing your plants with light, double-ended bulbs and CO2, they'll deplete the potassium even faster. If you are using a bloom stimulant to turn on flowering for more blooms and bigger blooms, they're going to deplete the potassium even faster. Instead of 2 or 3 days, it could be 1 day, and you get a potassium deficiency. And even if it doesn't show up in the crop, you can get a hidden hunger. The plant will stall because it's not making enough sugars. It says, okay, I'm just going to wait till I get more potassium. So in that stage, if they're stalling, they've been growing, filling in with flowers, flowering sites, and then nothing. Add a little bit of potassium sulfate. A little spoon, feed a little bit of that. It'll spark carbohydrate metabolism. The sugars will flow to the fruit and the flowers. They'll start to fill in again and unstall. I've worked with some gardeners with making little tonics like that for them. They've said that they've seen responses in 12 hours. 12 hours later, and they did side-by-side tests. So it doesn't take a lot though. It's not, oh, let's pour out a whole bunch of potassium. No, just give it a little bit. A 1/16 of a teaspoon for 2 gallons of water. And water that in with your fertilizer and your irrigation water. Plants will start to fill in again. Increase yield and quality. Okay, so use it as a boost. Biostimulants in Holland. I did go have a chance to go to the Netherlands and look at the bloom stimulants that they were using over there. This was in Belgium. That's my wife's too. These were sweet pepper plants, if you can see them. This was the control without the bloom stimulant, and then the next row had the bloom stimulant. They added it at the roots, and they added it as a foliar. The control of sweet peppers, 12 feet tall, loaded with peppers. 12 feet tall. That was the control. The one next to it with the bloom stimulant, halfway through the trial, they were already at 10% increase in yield and rising. I got to see the graph going up. And this was supposedly the genetic potential of the plant. They told me, the scientists there said, if you got a 2% increase in yield under these conditions, it would be statistically significant. They were at 10% and rising. Also, with the bloom stimulant, remember I said, we talked about the zinc finger transcription factor that turns on the genes for flowering, telling the plant to make more blooms and bigger blooms. I took one of the pictures at a pepper grower in the Netherlands, in Amsterdam, and he had me take a picture of the bottom of the plant. You can't really see it though, but there's a 12-foot tall sweet pepper plant. The bottom of the plant, they had some little suckers, vegetative shoots, just kind of shot out of the bottom. It had 3 sets of fruit on it. Because even though it wanted to make a vegetative sucker, the genes were saying, go make stems and leaves, make flowering parts. And that's how I know that my bloom stimulant is working. If I look at the very bottom of the plant and see a little crook on a bottom leaf or bottom stem, and there's a flower bud there, I say, ooh, that's the bloom stimulant. If that's what it's doing at the bottom of the plant, I wonder what it's doing at the top of the plant. So 10%, 20% increase in yield, just with the bloom stimulants that are used in small amounts. Now remember, I was seeing the graph as they were putting on more weight with fruit and flowers, that as they were putting on more weight with fruit and flowers, the potassium was being drawn down faster. So they literally took nutrient samples every week and had them analyzed, and they graphed that too. So as putting on more weight, the potassium is being depleted. I said, well, why don't you just add some more potassium? So it's the same as the control, because eventually won't the potassium be the limiting factor as they're putting on more weight? They said, we can't do that. Why not? I mean, it's a research greenhouse, plus or minus half a degree temperature. Everything's perfect, rock wool, hydroponic nutrients, nothing locked up. Why can't you just add a little more potassium? I said, because in a controlled experiment, you can only have one variable. If we put in more potassium, someone could read the report at the end and say, oh, you got more yield because you had more potassium. Got the bloom stimulant. But I can tell you, because I saw the results, if you're using a bloom stimulant, if you're pushing your plant with light and CO2, you're going to want to supplement with potassium often. during flowering, even every 2 or 3 days, to spoon feed a little extra potassium to keep those carbohydrates flowing all the way to the day of harvest. Yield. And higher bricks, quality as well. Otherwise they stall, and then eventually they unstall,
But
and
you can't put too
you're not
much
going to get all the way.
potassium in. You can't put too much potassium in?
Yeah, if you overdo it with potassium, it'll show up as a magnesium deficiency. So that, how do you recognize that? Bottom, the leaves at the bottom of the plant, the veins stay green, the tissue starts to turn yellow. So if it's during heavy flowering and you're boosting with potassium, and you went too far, more than what the plant needs, you'll start to see that. If you
So
start to
it'll
see it,
at the bottom of the plant?
you'll start to see it at the bottom. And then you just back off with your boost, maybe spray a little bit of B vitamin blend that has a magnesium carrier. It'll green right back up again, transport it. So that's what you watch for at the bottom. And I'd rather have a magnesium deficiency than a potassium deficiency. But what I really want is have everything just right. Then I get the optimal yield. Because once you see the symptoms of a deficiency, you've already hurt your plant. Even if they recover, they're still not going to get the yield that they would have if they would have been able to have optimal levels all the way through. Okay, so if you use any bloom stimulant, pushing your lights, pushing your CO2, you want to get a good potassium supplement. This particular one here I will recommend because it is mined from an organic source. There's no chemical extraction, so it can be used in organic gardening. It's safe for the microbes. It can be used in hydroponics as well. And it's very high, it has 50% potassium without giving it a whole bunch of stuff it doesn't need. Just giving it what it does need to spark metabolism. Okay, how are we doing on time?
125.
We're an hour and 25 minutes into it?
Yep.
Oh, it seemed like it was about a half hour to me. You guys are still with me? Okay. All right, we'll go through this a little bit more quickly. I want to talk a little bit more about what's in the biostimulants, because that's going to be the key to maximize your yield. Once you get your base nutrients right. Also remember this, the best growers are the best record keepers. You need to write down everything, your temperature, your humidity, your min-max for that. You write down, every time you add nutrients, you write down how much you add. Check your pH/DC if you're in hydroponics. And keep good notes. If you start to get a certain strain and you notice I'm getting a nitrogen deficiency, you say, well, at this part of growth, they need more nitrogen. So I'm going to supplement with nitrogen next time, the next round, before the symptoms show up. If you keep records, you can do it. If you're just adding a little of this and a little of that, wow, I got great results, but I can't remember how I did it. Or if I got bad results, what went wrong? You have to be a detective and solve the problem. So keep good records. And if you're starting a new crop or a new strain, the saying is, your third grow is your first grow. That first one, get your bases really, really good. Not a lot of additives. Your second one, you fine tune. Your third one, if you're keeping good notes, you should be hitting a stride. And it should be reproducible at that stage. But what do we do as hobbyists? We finally get it perfect, and then we start a whole new strain. Right? Because they have to start all over again. And that's what the car dealers do too. How many times, well, they finally got a good car. And then they discontinue and do something new with all kinds of bugs in it. But you got to work the bugs out. And the professional growers, that's why they have the computer controls. It's a record-keeping device. They're able to analyze all that. Well, when I added more temperature, added more CO2 under these conditions, I got this increase in yield. So they can make fine-tuning. They're finding ways to lower save 15% of their energy cost the next time. Because, well, maybe if it's not worth it to turn on the air conditioner or the heater under these conditions, I can back off a little on yield. So that's what they're doing. They're getting better and better yields every year, and they're lowering their energy budget and overhead every year. And they can compete. The Netherlands, almost all of the vegetables are produced in hydroponics over there. Very expensive. I've been in Rose growing facility over there. growing long stem roses where they didn't even have aisles between the roses. Someone would push a button, the whole row of roses would come out to them. They'd do their pruning and training and clipping, push the button, it would go to the end of the row, the next one would come out. Because they saved space. They weren't lighting the aisles. They didn't have them. So they were able to get 30% more production. But this millions of dollars, multi-million dollars to grow roses. How can you make money? They're making money. It's their #1 export. They can sell tomatoes to us at lower cost than what we could grow them ourselves. In fact, one time, the United States government sued Canada, accusing them of dumping tomatoes on the American market at below growers' cost. That's called dumping. It's illegal in trade. Well, brought to the World Court, they brought in the records, they were doing hydroponics. They were using the Dutch technology, putting it in the Canadian conditions. And they said, look, we're making a fair profit. We just have a lower overhead and better yields. They threw it out of court, so there's nothing wrong with doing it smarter. So I thought, wow, everybody in the United States, all the commercial growers now, are going to want to do hydroponics. We're still behind the rest of the world. So you can make the investment in fine-tuning your nutrients and your environment, spend money up front, and make that money back over and over and over again down the road. Get those double-ended lights. They cost more, they last longer. In the long run, they're as cheap to own as LEDs. So anyway, let's move into the other biostimulants that are in the root, grow, and bloom stimulants. Kelp you can use it as a seed soak. Get better germination, earlier germination rate. Use it at the roots early on. It's a root stimulant. It has auxins and cytokinins. We get more lateral root growth, more root mass. So you get a good, strong root system. The plant's going to take up water and minerals more efficiently. If that happens, more chemical reactions.
So
when that happens, better growth.
That's more vegetative.
Especially during vegetative, after transplant, because you want a good balanced growth between your top and your bottom. So you want to stimulate a little bit more root early on. But you need to have active root development all the way to the day of harvest. So a bloom stimulant from the Netherlands has the root stimulant in it.
Oh, all right.
The root, grow, and bloom all have the root stimulant, which is primarily the seaweed extract. All the way through. You can also use it as a foliar. This is great for yield too. During veg, you're not going to spray it on flowers. You do one spray in a week, one at the most. Once every 2 or 3 weeks will still have a beneficial effect. The cytokinins in the seaweed extract break what's called the apical dominance, your top growth, and stimulates more lateral bud development. So you get more branching. So if you're growing indoors under lights, you don't want them to grow straight up into the lights. You want them to spread out more as a canopy. So you're going to do pruning and training is important. So you use the lights properly, and doing a foliar spray once a week at the most with seaweed extract will stimulate the lateral bud development. So that downstream, that'll mean better yield. So that's part of your growth stimulant. Humic acid will help it, will work better with it at the root. 5 parts humic acid to 2 parts kelp. Works 50% better than either product alone for root growth. It's an intermediate chelator, so it helps with the uptake of minerals. In nature, humic and fulvic acid aid with the uptake of iron. We know how important that is. Iron is one of the limiting factors in soil. But humic and fulvic acid will hold on to those iron ions and other trace elements like a claw, hold them tightly enough so they don't get locked up, but loosely enough so it's available to the plant on demand. It also makes a bridge between your clay particles and your mineral fertilizers for the plant to take them up. And if you're doing organics, if you overdo it with organics, it holds on to the nutrients too tightly. The humic acid will also help make a bridge between your organics and the minerals that are ions that the plant takes up. So it's a good one. You put the two together though, the seaweed has the hormones, the humic acid has the trace elements that activate the enzyme turn them on, you got a boom box.
So is that, those two combined, are you creating an amino acid formula? Isn't that what you're saying?
Well, they're not creating an amino acid formula, but kelp has amino acids in it.
Right.
Kelp has B vitamins in it. Kelp and humic acid together will have over 60 beneficial trace elements that turn on enzymes in the plant. You know, you got the enzymes from the seed,
Right.
from your kelp, your enzymes, your nutrients, and you have the trace elements from the humic acid, because that's harvested from ancient compost piles. So that is a very powerful combination. You get that better root growth. It also stimulates the plant to make 50% more of an enzyme. That's a plant protection agent. It protects the chloroplasts. That's for your photosynthesis.
So again, you can use that throughout then?
You can use it throughout at the roots,
Right.
but not at the leaves. If you're going to do the foliar with the kelp, use the fulvic acid. That's more refined humic acid. They're smaller, more biologically active molecules. And if you take your 5 parts of the fulvic acid with 2 parts seaweed, shake that up together, just do 1 spray on the plant. The fulvic acid literally chelates the iron, takes it through the cell membranes, releases it inside the plant where it's needed the most, and then the iron is a catalyst for making chlorophyll. So the plant makes more chlorophyll. The plant starts making more chlorophyll, it needs to store it. So it stimulates the genes to make more chloroplasts. That means the plant's going to harvest more of your light energy. Harvest more energy, it's going to change it into sugars, it's going to store the sugars in the fruit and the flower, it's also going to release the sugars for energy to grow.
What was that
So
ratio?
that's why it's a bloom, also in the bloom stimulants. If you use this as a foliar, they'll go right into the cells, have immediate action on the plant. But you're not going to spray it on plants during flowering.
Right.
But even if you go to the earliest part of flowering and stop using it, the cytokinins literally pull nutrients into the tissue.
What was the ratio for that foliar?
5 parts fulvic acid or humic acid, and 2 parts seaweed. So they'll pull the sugars into the tissue. It pulls the amino acids into the tissue, the water and the other nutrients. It pulls them in. So we'll have a downstream effect. So even when you stop using it as a foliar, since it's creating this flow of nutrients into those developing buds, they'll have a downstream effect on color and aroma and quality. So you improve the nutritional value of food, you improve the nutritional value of medicine. Those trace elements are very key, especially the iron and the manganese for the key medicinal compounds. And producing those, you want those at optimum levels. So humic and fulvic acid, if you haven't tried it before, give it a try. Just do it one or two little fine mists during veg. You'll see the difference. And it doesn't cost that much. Just try it, see if it works. If you don't see any difference, don't do it next time. If you do, you're probably going to continue to do it. Okay, yucca is a natural wetting agent. If you're doing a foliar, add a little yucca to it. A 1/16 of a teaspoon treats 5 gallons of water. So a little goes a long way. It'll break the polarity of the water molecule, so when you spray that fulvic acid and kelp, instead of beating up on the waxy surface of the leaf, it spreads out in a film. It's more readily absorbed by the leaf tissue. It's more efficient. Or you can add it to your irrigation water or your nutrients. That was a secret in one of my first biohydroponic nutrients. Added a little yucca, because if you add it to there, a small amount, the water will spread out, disperse through the whole root zone. A lot of times you water, this goes through channels through your potting soil or around the edge of the pots, and that's where the roots are. If you add a little yucca, it spreads out through the whole root zone. So all the minerals get to all the fine root hairs. If I'm using the seaweed, those hormones get to all the fine root hairs, stimulate the production of more root hairs. Those trace elements get to all the root hairs and all the microbes, activates the enzymes in the root growth. So you're going to stimulate more root growth as well, just by adding the yucca. and it'll be more efficient use of water and minerals by the plant. And that adds up into increased sugars, increased yield. See, these all work together. It's not like, let's just do one thing. You know, if you're using one thing, a bloom stimulant at the end, okay, good, during flower. You'll see better results. Add a little potassium with it. But if you don't have a strong, healthy plant to start with, you're still not going to reach the genetic potential. So it's a whole process there. I'm almost done. B vitamins, they're biologically active. They're in almost all the biostimulant products. Every one of them has some B vitamins in it. It stimulates metabolism of microorganisms in the soil and of the actual plant root cells. If you just took B1 all by itself and poured it on the roots, you probably wouldn't see much of a difference. You know, you say, oh, it stimulated root growth. It would be at the microscopic level. You know, you'll have thicker root hairs and, you know, maybe a little bit more root hair, but you won't see, wow, I got twice as many roots. You won't see much. But you combine it with other things, like the seaweed extract or the kelp or the humic acid. It stimulates metabolism of the microbes. If you're using it in soil, they'll be eaten up by the microbes, the high-growth promoting rhizobacteria, within a matter of hours, most of it. Just the leftovers go to the plant. But if the metabolism of the microbes is stimulated, they're energized. They're using fuel and they're using it more efficiently, they start to vibrate with energy. And then as they vibrate, they divide. Pop, pop, pop. And as the microbes are dividing, that's when they make the digestive enzymes to make amino acids. That's when they make rooting hormones, right on the roots. That's when they make organic acids that aid with the uptake of iron and copper, manganese, and zinc. So if you're using the B vitamins, it doesn't have much of a direct effect on the plant, but it has a big effect on the microbes in the soil. So you're working with nature. Now it does have one direct effect though. One dose of high-level B1 stimulates what's called the plant's systemic induced response. It primes the plant, puts them on high alert. So if the plant comes under attack, say by root rot, or it comes under attack by a fungi, or if it comes under a stress, if it comes under attack, the plant's natural immune system responds instantly. So you're priming the plant so the plant's response is more quick. So if the plant responds more quickly to the attack or to the stress, they're going to recover more quickly, and that can have a downstream effect in harvest and yield as well. Because if they're under attack and they go into shock, they'll stop. And then you're going to wait another week or two. If they come out of that in a couple days instead, then they're going to continue to grow and make. Some of those microbes literally rescue plants from stress, by the way. They make an enzyme that breaks down the ethylene molecule. When plants are, I don't want to get too much into this, but when plants are under stress, they make ethylene. And then the ethylene tells them to shut down making roots, shut down in new growth. That's when they go into shock. Well, some microorganisms make an enzyme that breaks the precursor molecule to the ethylene. So it literally rescues the plant from stress and restores normal growth much more quickly. So you're doing a couple things here. You're stimulating the plant's natural immune system and you're rescuing the plant from stress. So yes, B vitamins do have an effect on the plant, but indirectly, or just barely directly. And they only found that with the B1 for the systemic induced response. They only discovered that 2 years ago in plant science. So anyway, that's a good thing. They put them in all the biostimulant products. Every bloom stimulant out there, every root stimulant has B vitamins in it. If you get into something like dark energy, it's going to have B vitamins in it. Almost all of them. Okay, now we're at the end. Cane molasses, this is for the soil growers. The cane molasses feeds the microorganisms. The microorganisms feed the plants. Toward the end of flowering now, past the heavy flowering. During the heavy flowering, what are we adding? Potassium. If there's a lot of energy going on, we want a little magnesium supplement, especially potassium sulfate, magnesium sulfate, to stimulate flowering as well as the quality. But toward the end, plants hoard their sugars. They've been doing photosynthesis. Now we want to store them in the seeds, store them in the flowers, store them in the fruit for the next generation. They stop leaking sugars to the microorganisms in the roots. So the microorganisms run out of energy, out of fuel, they go to sleep. They go dormant. So this is one way we can work with nature. It's great in nature because the microbes go to sleep. The next year, the seeds or the fruit falls to the ground, it germinates, it gets re-inoculated by the microorganism, starts the cycle of life over. That's great, but we don't have next year. In our gardens, we're going to be harvesting. We're chopping them down. We're starting over. So that's where we can help nature. When they stop leaking sugars, that's when we feed them some sugars. The molasses, cane molasses. That will stimulate the microorganisms. They'll continue to grow and reproduce. They'll have more calcium available. They're going to have more active root growth. They're going to accumulate sugars in the plant all the way to the day of harvest. And they're going to fill in. They're going to bulk up. They're going to get sweeter at the very end. It's not because the sugar goes into the plant. It's because you're feeding the microbes. And this is what microbes, also soluble iron. The color in cane molasses, that orange color is iron. So when the microbes eat the cane molasses, for their metabolism, they make a molecule called the siderophore. That means iron carrier. That's the best chelator of iron in nature. So they keep the iron soluble for their own needs, and the plant takes up more iron too. If the plant takes up more iron, makes more chlorophyll. Make more chlorophyll, harvest more light energy. Make more sugars, fill in, bulk up, get sweeter, better quality at the end, instead of just shutting down and stalling it as it ripens. So that nature is doing that. So we can give them a little cane molasses. This is what the plant growth promoting rhizobacteria make. They make growth hormones. They make rooting hormones on the roots and cytokinins. They make B vitamins right in the roots to stimulate the plant and to stimulate their own metabolism. So we should, whoops, I didn't do that. They make amino acids. So they're literally making the amino acids that stimulate root cells to open up calcium ion channels. They make organic acids like fulvic acid and Krebs cycle intermediates. And those help with the uptake. They chelate iron, copper, manganese, and zinc, which turn on the enzymes so the plants can do thousands of chemical reactions per second instead of hundreds or zero. That's how they work. This is what it's doing. Nature has all these answers already. The biostimulants are just extracts from those microorganisms. And they make the siderophore, we told you what that is, iron carrier, and volatile organic compounds. They literally make compounds you can't put in a bottle. I wish I could. I really do, because I love to create the perfect nutrient solution for the plants. But volatile organic compounds are more like aromas, a bouquet of aromas, but they can stimulate up to 600 different genes in the plant. One of those volatile organic compounds tell the plant to take up more iron. Literally, turn on the genes to tell the plant, take it up. One of them, those compounds, turns off the sugar signal in the plant. So when the plant has enough sugar for the rest of its life, it says, I'm done. Don't have to do more photosynthesis anymore. Don't have to make any more sugars, I have enough. If it gets that gene gets turned off, because of the microbe, it'll continue to accumulate carbohydrates all the way to the day of harvest. And then we have optimized our yield. And see what, now that's what the Dutch are doing. They have the perfect mineral balance. They're adjusting the minerals all the way through different stages of the plant's growth, according to the environment, and they're using the organic biostimulants, so they're reducing pesticide. So, I guess that's it.
Questions, guys?
Any questions?
Just a comment on the hydro gardens. In the Walt Disney at Epcot, they got a really cool one there. You can walk through. It's freaking awesome. I went there with a couple trips to that. It was so cool.
I've been there
They do the same
many
kind of
times. I even know the guy that set it up.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
He helped set it up. From the University of Arizona. I don't know, this is a lot of information today. Glad everybody's still awake. Appreciate it.
Thank you for taking the time out.
We have food out there. Well, this is really what we want to do. We want to be able, if we can do this right, if we can manage the nutrients just right for optimal yield, we'll be able to reduce our fertilizers, because we're not over-fertilizing. We'll be able to reduce or eliminate fungicides and pesticides. They'll have stronger, healthier plants. We'll be able to increase the nutritional value of food, nutrient dense, higher bricks, increase the medicinal value of medicine, and there's a little side benefit, protect the environment. That's a win-win for all of us. We can, outdoors in gardens, we do this, manage this properly, the soil will become more productive from year to year. If we do it indoors in our hydroponics or indoor gardening, we should be able to maximize yield. But make sure you take your notes. Take your notes, make fine adjustments, and if you have problems, catch them young so that you can cure them quickly. And last but not least, that's my email address, harley@growuniversity.net. You think of a question later, email me. If you want to learn more free online classes, just go to growuniversity.net, sign up for free online classes. They're live. We have questions and answer sessions. We're going into individual, we have one class on minerals, one class on biostimulants, one class on integrated pest management, one class on soil microbiology and health and occupants. So we get more on one on horticultural lighting, so you can learn more on those specific subjects. And tell your friends too. So thank you very much. See you next time.
Thank you very much.
Yay.